Did you know that there are 9 hidden costs that will quietly eat up your property investing profits and leaving you wondering why you're not making any money on that last deal? Hi, my name is Tony Law, and in this video, I wanted to really highlight these important hidden costs for you so that you're going in with your eyes open, because here's the truth. Many newer property investors, well, they don't account for all of these hidden costs. So when they run their numbers on that deal that they're looking at, it looks great. But you've simply got to factor in all of these hidden costs, especially when evaluating a property investment in today's market. Otherwise, how can you possibly make a judgment call on whether you should be doing that deal in the first place? And by the way, if you hang around to the end, I've got an amazing free gift for you that will help you nail down these numbers so you can assess each deal accurately. Okay. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's dive in, starting off with the one and only one that you should absolutely know about already, and that is stamp duty. Now, at the time of filming, if you're buying any kind of second property, be it for your own use or as an investment property, you will pay an extra 5% stamp duty surcharge over and above any normal stamp duty that you might normally be paying. So let's imagine you're buying a £250,000 property. On that, from £0 to £125,000, you pay no stamp duty if this is your only property. But on the next £125,000 to £250,000, you actually pay a 2% stamp duty surcharge. Or rather, not surcharge, that's the standard stamp duty that you pay on that amount of money. So overall, if this is your only investment property, you're going to pay £2,500 in stamp duty. But if this is a second property, be it for your own use or as an investment property, you're going to actually pay a 5% stamp duty surcharge on the full amount, on the full £250,000. So 5% of £250,000 is £12,500. Add that to your original £2,500, means you're going to be paying a grand total of 15 grand stamp duty on that deal. Now, that's a big jump, isn't it? And it often gets forgotten when people are running the numbers, especially since that 5% figure only came in October of last year. Previously, it was 3%. So just make sure that you're including in your upfront costs that stamp duty when working out the deal stacks up. Next up, we have our legal and compliance costs. Now, of course, we're all aware that there are some costs associated with this, but have you really given thought to how much that's actually going to cost you? Now, for a standard buy-to-let, conveyancing would typically be somewhere in the kind of £1,500 to £2,000 region in today's market. But if there's anything unusual about the property, those figures can go even higher. Also, be aware of any legal requirements from your council. Depending on the property type and your area, you might need an updated EPC, a gas safety certificate almost certainly, an electrical installation condition report, also known as an EICR, or even a property license. And these aren't usually included in any quote from a solicitor. So again, you've got to plan ahead and make sure you've got all these little extras into your figures when stacking that deal. RICS surveys and valuations come next. Now, when it comes to surveys, it can be tempting to really cut corners, can't it? To keep your outgoings down as much as possible. And I guess most investors kind of just get a basic valuation or a home buyer's report, as it's often known, which costs around £400 to £700, depending on the size of the property and where you are. But honestly, that's never going to really give you a full picture, is it? If it's an older property, or you're buying an HMO, or somewhere where you're going to be kind of developing out, honestly, I would personally invest in a RICS Level 3 home survey. Now, this is the most comprehensive property survey offered by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and it can cost you about £800 to £1,500, again, depending on what it is and where you're based. But it gives you a really detailed structural assessment and can flag up issues like damp, subsidence, poor electrics, problems with boilers, etc., before you actually complete on that deal. So again, you can either factor those numbers into your equation, or you can obviously use it as a really great and strong negotiation tool. It's one of those costs that might actually save you thousands down the line. So I think surveys of that caliber, I think they're well worth their money. Number 4, we've got refurbishment and maintenance costs. Now, this one actually catches a lot of new investors out because I think some people just sort of pluck a figure out of the air. Because even if a property looks okay, there's always going to be some refurb maintenance costs. In my opinion, there's always more costs than you're imagining. And over the past couple of years, the cost of refurbishing a property has risen significantly. For example, rewiring can cost you around about $4,000 to $8,000, again, depending on what the property is and where you're based, etc., etc. Replacing a boiler might be $1,500 to $3,000. Roof repairs can be anything from £1,000 to $5,000. Obviously, it could be a lot less than 1,000 if it's just a couple of tiles. It could be a lot more than $5,000 if it's something more substantial. You need to get the specialists in to actually get actual quotes for you. Treating damp might be a few £100, or it might be a couple of grand. Garden or fencing work might be 500, might be £2,000. But you've got to get at least 2 quotes for each job that you're actually wanting to get quoted up, because every property is different and every tradesperson is going to be giving you different figures. And don't forget, if the property is empty during the refurb or after a tenant leaves, you're going to have to pay the council tax yourself, and of course any utilities, etc., which could easily be well in excess of £300 a month. And how long is that refurb going to be going on for? Again, you've just got to factor those costs in. By the way, if you're finding this video in any way helpful, it would just be awesome if you could click on that like button down there, because it really helps our channel if that's okay. So at number 5, I wanted to mention letting agent costs versus managing it yourself, actually. See, if you're using a letting agent, you're going to expect to pay around about 8 to 12% of your monthly rental income on that property as a management fee. And don't forget, agents usually charge VAT on top of this figure. So don't forget to factor that into your costs. Plus, there's usually a setup fee of some kind. That might be a couple of £100, might be £400, might be more than that every time they find a new tenant. Now, of course, if you want to avoid these costs, you could consider self-managing, which means that you'll be putting the adverts in for the property, you'll be handling tenant viewings, you'll be referencing, you'll be collecting the rent, you'll be dealing with maintenance issues and staying on top of legal compliance, etc. Now, managing yourself can obviously save you money, but it's much more hands-on, naturally, and you do need to have good systems in place to make it work hands-off or largely hands-off. Plus, an agent will make sure every year that your tenant is paying the correct amount of rent. Whereas, are you more inclined to let that increase slide? I honestly think that is actually where agents really come into their own. Ultimately, though, only you can decide if you want to self-manage. But to give you some idea of what we do, we self-manage some of our properties, obviously the easier ones, and we actually use agents to manage others. Number 6, I've got down voids when the property is empty. This is a really interesting hidden cost because almost no one factors in anything for voids these days because they just assume that the property will always be full. Basically because there's just so much demand for single lets. HMOs now, slightly less. More people are seeing voids on their HMOs. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to mention this here. So let's talk about voids, because these can actually nibble away at your cash flow without you kind of really realizing it. And you should be factoring in at least some voids, because apart from the loss of rent when that place is empty, again, you're going to be paying the council tax yourself. You're going to be paying utilities. You're going to be paying for the general upkeep, etc. Now, obviously, there are things you can do to reduce the void periods, in particular, making sure that you really look after your tenants, because happy tenants generally mean they stay longer, in my experience, pretty obviously. But also, when you are notified that a tenant is leaving, you've got to make sure that you or your agent is really on the ball and will immediately be ready to start organising viewings, because any delays mean void periods, which again is going to nibble away at that cash flow. At number 7, I wanted to mention insurance costs, especially in regard to HMOs. Now, you obviously need landlord building insurance. That's non-negotiable. I'm sure everyone's got that. But if your property is furnished, like a holiday let or service accommodation, or obviously an HMO, you may also want to consider having contents insurance. It's maybe not essential, but I have it on some of my properties. And don't forget that if you are running an HMO, you most definitely need specialist HMO insurance. You most definitely need to make sure that the agent is fully aware that this is indeed an HMO. And they'll probably want to know what kind of tenants you have in that HMO, because that will probably affect the policy. Now, for a standard buy-to-let, you're going to be looking at, £200 to £500 a year per property. Again, depending on the property, depending on the location. And for an HMO, it could be more like £700 or more per property. Again, depending on the HMO, depending on the location. But if you have multiple properties like Liana and I do, well, it's worth noting that you're probably going to get a portfolio policy, which is usually quite a bit cheaper because you have all those properties in on the one policy. And if you are investing in HMOs, let me give you a couple of other specific things that I think you need to factor in. So, number 8, HMO fire safety compliance. I've just had a big issue with one of my properties on this, and so it's right at the forefront of my head. So this can be a bigger financial cost than some people actually think, especially if you're organising the work yourself. So here we're talking about making sure that you've got fire doors, latches that are appropriate for those doors, interlinked smoke alarms, probably a fire panel, emergency lighting, maybe even a sprinkler or a mist system. We have those in some of our properties. Needless to say, the exact requirements would be specified by your architect and building regs person. But depending on the property, these upgrades can actually cost you several thousands. And if anything, I think you want to go beyond the bare minimum so that you're kind of future-proofing that property. Now, at number 9, I've got furniture and white goods in HMOs. Now, obviously, all HMO rooms need to be furnished, so you'll need to obviously supply your basics, your beds, your wardrobes or drawers, desks, etc., as well as a whole load of soft furnishings, etc. Plus, over time, you've got to factor in the fact that these things will get worn out. You're going to be replacing them. So you must build in a contingency into your costs. Otherwise, your rooms are going to look really, really dated quickly, which is going to lead to voids, as we've already mentioned and talked about extensively. Also, you're going to need to supply white goods like washing machines or fridge freezers, etc., or microwaves and so on. And again, you need to allow contingencies because these break. I know that one the hard way. I learned that one the hard way. And they can often be more expensive to repair than basically buying new appliances. By the way, a really quick tip here. Whenever you're buying a white goods, washing machine, fridge freezer, whatever it might be, I think it's always worth paying for the extended warranty, even though I would never do that in my own home. The reason for that is because, like in some of my properties, I've got a whole load of people using that washing machine. Like there might be 8 tenants using that washing machine, 8 tenants using that dryer. And you know what? They get burnt out. I think those extended warranties in this situation really pay for themselves time and time again. So there you go. There's my list of 9 hidden costs. However, if you'd like a complete list of all the hidden costs and obvious costs that you need to factor in when buying your next investment property, like mortgages, which I didn't even mention here because I don't consider them a hidden cost, click the link here or in the description box below and I'll send that list straight out to you. It's a fully updated spreadsheet and I've kind of got everything on there that I think you need to make sure that you're factoring in to your costs. Thank you so much for watching this one. I really hope you found it helpful. And if you think I've missed anything really important, please drop me a comment below and I'll make sure that I add it to my list. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you.